All right, I want to talk about something different today than I've been talking about in my last few videos. We're just going to go completely off topic. This will be a different kind of video. There's not going to be a whole lot of editing here. I'm going to try to do this in, one take, so just bear with me. But I've been getting back into collecting video games. This was a hobby I got into several years ago. Kind of got out of, I wouldn't say out of it, but I stopped buying as much stuff. I got very few and far between where I would buy stuff. And now, though, I'm starting to kind of get back into it, get excited about it again. And I want to just kind of tell you how you can start your own video game collection, as well as, how to do that on a tight budget. Maybe you don't have a whole lot of money to spend. But the cool thing is, even if you don't have much money to spend, you can still have a really cool video game collection. And I think I am proof of that. The things I'm going to show you today, I did not spend much money on. And so, if you're looking to get into collecting video games and maybe you are on a budget, you don't have a lot of money to spend, stay tuned because I'm going to give you some good information of how you can do that. All right, let's get into it. The first thing you need to know before you ever go out and purchase your first items of your video game collection, first thing you need to know is you need to know your stuff. You need to have a good understanding of what is valuable. Now, I'm using the word valuable. I don't necessarily mean cash value. I think that's part of it. If something does have cash value, obviously that's a way that we value stuff. But there could be stuff that's valuable maybe just to you, maybe because you have memories of it, or, it's something that you enjoy. So maybe it's valuable to you, but it's not valuable to everybody. That's fine. But, there are some general ways that we can look at value and what's valuable. One of them is, what's in demand? What are the things that collectors are after? Another way that things can be valuable is through rarity. If there was only 100 of this certain game ever made and, you can't find them anywhere, obviously that thing's going to be valuable. But mostly what we're talking about with value and with collecting video games is demand. What are the types of games that collectors are after? That's the kind of stuff we're going to be looking for, the stuff that you want to add to your collection. So first of all, the first kind of game that you want to look for, these are games that are highly sought after, are your first-party games. First-party games are really highly sought after, really in demand, really valuable. And what I mean by first-party are the games that are made by the same company who makes the console. So the best example would be like Mario. Mario is a Nintendo product. Nintendo makes all the Mario games. You can't get a Mario game for a PlayStation, right? So that's what I mean by first-party games. And especially the Nintendo first-party games. These are some of the most sought after, valuable games you can find. So if you see these, you definitely want to add them to your collection. I'll show you a few of what I got just so you know what I'm talking about here. Let me grab. And I want you to know that these games that I'm going to show you today, this is just part of my collection. Sorry, I bumped the mic there. This is just part of it. And again, I want to stress that I have not spent a lot of money. We're going to go into the money in a little while, but I want to show you a few things. Of course, this game's a classic. This is one of my favorite Zelda games of all time. Even if this wasn't a valuable game, I would have bought it because I just love this game. But Zelda, you see something with Zelda on it, it's going to be valuable. So that's the kind of thing you want to be looking for. This is really cool. I've never seen this before until I got it. And to be honest with you, I don't remember exactly where I got it. I think it was through a Facebook. Somebody was selling like a bunch of games in bulk, and this was one of them. But even things like, the Mario sports games, the Mario Olympics, that kind of stuff is, it's good. I mean, if you see this stuff, that's the kind of stuff you want. Wario, that's a Nintendo product. That's something you want. The Paper Mario games are really hard to find and really highly sought after. But even going outside of Nintendo for a second, now this is not a what's the word I'm looking for? This is not a first party game right here, but Mega Man is sort of an iconic character. And so the Mega Man games, those are games that people want. They're kind of sought after. Sonic is originally was a Sega character, and he's one of these characters that people like. And so these games are valuable. Here's another Sonic game. I wasn't a huge Sonic fan, but I just picked it up. Another cool Zelda game I got with that other one. It says something about a promotional disc, and there's 4 games on there. I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. But even stuff like the Wii Play games that, it's a Nintendo licensed product. Those are things that you want to grab if you can. And then, of course, your Mario Kart and even the Super Smash Bros. Series. Those are very, very good finds if you can find something like that. And we're going to talk about where you find these things in a little bit. But right now, I just want to kind of give you an idea of what you should be looking for. Aside from the first party games, there's certain genres that are typically highly valued. One would be the RPG genre. And I know that's a broad term, but typically like the turn-based RPGs, some people would say like JRPGs, those are really valuable games typically. In fact, I have not had a lot of success finding those type of games. I'll show you this one. Now I don't think this one is very valuable, and ignore that price tag because I did not pay $20 for this game. Probably like $1. But that's the kind of things we're talking about. Things like Final Fantasy series or like the old Chrono Trigger game for the Super Nintendo. Those types of games, if you see them, grab them because they're typically in demand with collectors. Another genre that you want to be on the lookout for is the horror genre. This is Silent Hill: The Room. But yeah, the horror genre is one that people love, and they love these games. And so if you see anything like this out there, pick it up. And then there are your games that are sort of like iconic. They're, pop culture icons. Maybe they were big back when they came out, or they've just gotten popular over time. I'll give you a few examples of games that I have that I think fit into that category. This is Shadow of the Colossus. A lot of people love this game, talk about how great it is and moving, and I'll be honest with you, I've never played it, but people talk about how awesome the story is. So I think that would fit into that category. Another one, and I have played this game quite a bit when it first came out, Twisted Metal Black. I don't understand why they quit making the Twisted Metal games, because I love these games, man. If they made a new Twisted Metal game, I would buy it. Gran Turismo series, this was huge back when PlayStation 2 first came out. And so I think it fits into that iconic game category. It's probably not worth a lot monetarily, but it's something that I want to have in my collection. And another game that I played a lot when it came out is the Tony Hawk series, and especially this game, Tony Hawk 3. These games were huge back then, and especially the earlier ones, Tony Hawk 1, 2, 3, those are going to be very collectible. Something else you want to be on the lookout for when you're out there looking to add things to your collection of games is things like cases, right? Not only is this a cool Nintendo DS case, but it holds like a bunch of my Nintendo DS games and the system and things like that. So it's good to have these cases, not only just because they're nice cases and they're collectible, but for practical storage reasons, right? Now, when you do find some games and you're thinking about buying these games, it's always good to open them up and see how complete it is. So going back to this game, Shadow of the Colossus, I'm going to open it up here and show you. This has the book. It's got this cool little game booklet with all the art and the instructions and things that games used to come with. And of course, the CD, you want to take a look and make sure the back of the CD doesn't look like it's been, ran over by 118 wheelers or something like that. And I just noticed this. I'm sure I noticed it back at the time, but this has like a memory card in here that I also got along with this game. So You always want to just kind of take a look and see if it has the manual. If it has the manual and obviously the game, and it's in the original case with the original artwork, that is something that I would consider a complete game. And if you can get a game that's complete like that, that just adds a lot more to the value. And while we're on the subject of completeness, if it's a game that originally came in a cardboard box like this, or some of the older NES games came in cardboard boxes, and you can get it with that cardboard box, some of that stuff can be extremely valuable. I don't know that this game is all that valuable, even though it does have the box, but I know this is a game that a lot of people loved. It's one of the first like MMO RPG games, I believe. I never played this one, but it's an old computer game, but it still has the the cardboard box. It's in really good shape, and if I open it up, it still has like all the there, I'll open it up and let you see. It's got the game disc, and it's got like a big like map of the place, and it's got like this really thick book with a ton of pages, and another like poster that goes on your wall. Man, if you can find something that has everything like that, pretty much you're gonna want to get that, because that kind of stuff can be really valuable. But even if it doesn't have a really high monetary value, it's just really cool to have everything like it was when it was bought from the store, a long time ago. So be on the lookout for that kind of stuff, especially. Now let's talk about some of the stuff that you want to avoid when it comes to games, stuff that's really not valuable. Now understand, I'm saying avoid this stuff, but if it's something that you want and you think it'd be cool to add this to your collection for whatever reason, maybe it's a game that you like to play, or you just want to get every one of these certain types of games, whatever it is, then that's fine. I'm just giving you a general rule of thumb to say, these games are really not that valuable, not something you're looking for. And the first type of game would be sports games, especially like your yearly sports games. So like your Madden 19, Madden 21, or, like NHL 16. Yeah, those kind of games like that are just, in general, they're just worthless. They're not worth anything. Nobody wants those games. So unless they're special to you or hold a special place in your heart, I wouldn't pay anything for games like that. And then, there's what they call the shovelware type games. These are games that, for like the Nintendo Wii, for example, there were like over 1,000 titles released for the Wii. And a lot of them are just like little party games, and, there's like 1 million dance games for the Wii. In general, those are worthless. They're not worth anything. So unless they're special to you for some particular reason. But now if you see one and you think, hey, that's pretty cool, I think that's neat, I'd like to have that in my collection, there's nothing wrong with buying it. And I think this game would probably fit in that category, but I just thought it was interesting that there's a Bible game for the original Xbox, apparently. So I bought it. Nothing wrong with that if you just want to, add those things to your collection. But keep in mind, we are talking about, being on a budget and how to collect these games on a budget. And so we want to be careful with what we're buying, right? Now, how can you know what a game is worth? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but really it's as simple as just looking it up on eBay. Just punch it in, look it up on a site like eBay. Now, if you're going to use eBay in particular, I would, filter it and see what's actually sold. I mean, somebody might have the Bible game up on eBay and it's listed at like, $500 or best offer. That doesn't mean it's worth $500. You have to go to sold and see how much this game is actually selling for to get an idea of what the monetary value of it is. So that's one way you can do it. You can do the same thing with Amazon. Amazon also sells used video games too. There's also some other websites that kind of just have a list of games and their values. I I don't have those names of those websites today, but if you just Google search it, you'll find all that stuff. It's actually pretty easy to find out what a game is worth. And hey, I'm not above, being in a thrift store or somewhere where I've picked up a game off the shelf or whatever, maybe a yard sale, and then just looking it up on my phone to say, hey, is this game worth anything? Because, I don't know all this stuff off the top of my head. But anyway, that's the first rule, is to know your stuff before you go out. Now, if you're like me and you're a little bit older, you're in your 40s and you've been playing video games all your life, and you're probably ahead of the curve in knowing your stuff, right? You know what's popular and what's not and things like that. But, do a little homework on games before you start your collection. It can save you some money. So now let's talk about where to go to find these things. Where are we going to find games to add to our collection? One of the best places you can start is by going to some yard sales. Yard sales are where you're going to get your best deals. These are people who are just trying to get rid of the stuff from their house and make room, and they're not really trying to make a ton of money off of it. And so you can find some really good deals at yard sales. Now, I don't remember exactly where everything I have came from. I do know this one thing did come from a yard sale, and it is, I showed you this case earlier, this Nintendo DS case. And of course it has like a cord and like a little Guitar Hero controller. But it also came with like a couple of Nintendo DS consoles and like a bunch. I mean, you can hear there's like a ton of Nintendo DS games in here. And some of these are really good games like Mario Kart and Pokemon games that are valuable and are sought after. And I think I got all of this for like $15 at a yard sale. Just the whole thing. So that's the kind of thing you can run into at a yard sale. Yard sales are awesome for finding good deals, spending just a little bit of money, but getting a lot in return. Now, if you're going to do yard sales, I got to tell you, you have to ask sometimes about the video games. You have to go and say, do you have any video games? Because more than one time, I have asked the person at the yard sale, do you have any video games? And they would say, oh yeah, I think I got some stuff inside. One time I had a lady, I'll try to put these pictures up on the video because I don't have it anymore. But one time I had a lady, I asked her, do you have any video games? And she's like, I think I might have some stuff up in the attic. And she goes in the house. She came back like 10 minutes later with a huge box with a NES and like 20 NES games and controllers and the light gun and even a Game Boy, like the old gray, the original Game Boy, the big giant Game Boy. And she sold all of that to me for $60. And these, when I say 20 games, these were 20 like really good games, like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and like 3 Zelda games and a bunch of Mario games. These were like iconic games, and it was well worth $60. So if I had not asked this lady, hey, do you have any video games? I would have just walked up, looked around for a second, and left, and I never would have gotten that deal. Now, one of the downsides about doing yard sales is that, depending on where you live, I guess, you're not going to have a lot of density in one place. You're going to have to drive somewhere and then look and then drive to another place and then look. And so, but now you can negate some of that by doing some planning ahead of time. You can go on to Facebook and your local yard sale group and see, okay, where are the yard sales at tomorrow? And you can plan you out a little route and say, hey, I want to go here and here and here. And, that way you're saving some time and, you don't spend 3 hours out going to yard sales and you only get to 5 different locations and you don't find anything. So do a little pre-planning if you're going to do yard sales. That's my advice. But yard sales are great. I mean, that's S tier when it comes to where to look for video games. And just below yard sales, I would put the flea market. If you have a local flea market where people can go and set up tables, that's pretty much like one big yard sale in a way. But there are 2 different types of tables at the flea market. So you've got the tables of people who they're just coming there treating it like a yard sale. They're just setting up, trying to get rid of some stuff from their house, make a little bit of money. And that's fine. If you go to those tables, like at my local flea market. Those tables are around the outer edge of the flea market. So if you go to those tables, you can find good deals. Now, in the inner part of the flea market, and it may be different depending on what flea market, but in the inner part of my local flea market, those are like your professional flea marketers, right? Those are the people who are there every time the flea market is open, and they have their own table, the same table every time. And sometimes they just leave their stuff there. And, they usually have their own little niche of stuff that they're selling. Maybe they're the jewelry guy, or they're the knife lady, or, whatever. And within that area, you will find one or two or more people selling electronics or selling video games. I don't go to those people because you're not going to get good deals from those people. They know what they have. They know what it's worth, and they're not going to sell it for less than what it's worth. So you can just save your time and avoid those people altogether if you want to. Nothing against them personally. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them personally, but we're talking about how to collect video games on a budget. So when you're trying to do that, you don't want to be buying from other collectors, right? Which is what you'll be doing if you go to that area of the flea market. So flea markets can be good, but just avoid the professional flea marketers, right? Another good source can be a thrift store, somewhere like Goodwill, or we have Salvation Army thrift stores where I live. I don't know what kind of thrift stores you may have, but those can be a good source for video games. And this is lately where I've been doing my shopping for video games. Let me show you a few things that I found just very recently. This is Skyrim for the PC, and you can see it's got the manual and the CD. I found this at a Goodwill. And the thing is, the thing about thrift stores is some of them have caught on to the fact that video games, especially some older video games, are more valuable. And so a lot of them will pull those out and try to sell them online. A lot of Goodwills do that. But even so, there are things that slip through the cracks. So if you go and you look in the DVD section, you'll probably find a few video games that slipped in there. This is exactly where I found this Skyrim game. And I paid 99 cents for this Skyrim game at Goodwill. And this game is well worth 99 cents. I would play this game today. It's just an iconic game, and it's got the manual. It's complete. So that's a very good find. I just picked this one up yesterday, and this is another iconic game. Diablo 2, another PC game, but I don't know if this one is complete because I do know that it's not complete because it originally, I'm sure, would have came in a box like this, but and it doesn't have that, so it don't have all the books and the manuals, but it does have the original jewel case. It has all of the discs. It came with 3. Falling out on me, but anyway, it came with 3 discs. And it does have all of that stuff with it. So I thought that was really cool. This is a game that I've played a lot, and I know it's an iconic game that a lot of people love. And so I grabbed it, and I'll tell you how much I paid for it. $1.79. $1.79. I think that's an awesome deal for that game. I don't really collect DVDs or anything like that, but at the same thrift store where I picked up Diablo 2, I happened to see this Choose Your Own Adventure DVD. And if you look back at some of the videos on my channel, you'll see why I grabbed this, because I did a whole series on Choose Your Own Adventure books. Anyway, just thought it was cool to see that there. And that also was 99 cents. So very cheap, and just something cool to add to my collection. So sometimes at a thrift store, you have to look really hard. You have to look through the DVDs, and you have to look. Sometimes they keep their games behind the counter, and you have to look behind the counter in the little case and see what games they have there. And you have to be careful too, because sometimes they'll get a little crazy with the game prices. They'll say something like, games are $8 a piece. No matter what game it is, it's $8. So they'll have a copy of Madden 22 and they're selling it for $8, and I wouldn't pay 8 cents for that game. Even if it's a game that I want, I'm probably not going to pay $8 for it. Because I'm trying to get these things as cheap as possible. It would have to be something really, really, really good in order for me to pay that much. But I'm just saying that to say, be careful about thrift stores. Some of them are good, and you can usually find good stuff there. Some of them are going to be ridiculous, and you'll learn to just avoid them. But the best thing to do is just visit the ones in your area, and you'll quickly learn which ones are good and which ones are usually not so good for games. Let me show you a few more things that I've got that I found at thrift stores. And I've showed you a few of these already, but just to give you an idea of what you can find, this Silent Hill game I found at a Goodwill. It was $4. Now, $4 is probably the top end of what I would have paid for this game, to be honest with you. Still a pretty good deal because it is complete. You can see it has the book and, that kind of stuff. So, and this Shadow of the Colossus game I got at the same time at the same thrift store, the same day at that thrift store. So sometimes you can find some really cool stuff in thrift stores. You just have to be a little picky about it, and sometimes you got to search a little bit. Of course, the upside of shopping at a thrift store is that, they're open a lot more than a yard sale, right? You can't go out at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon and go to yard sales. You have to do it on a Saturday morning or whatever. Thrift stores, you can kind of go to them on your schedule. And that's the upside of shopping at thrift stores. Another place that I used to get a lot of games from, I kind of avoid it nowadays, but it may be something you want to try, is the Facebook groups, like the local Facebook, I guess it's called Marketplace now. It used to be different back when I started doing this, but the local Facebook groups can be a good place sometimes to find games. Like I said, I don't really like doing that anymore. I don't like having to go out and meet up with people, and I don't know, it's just weird, and I want to avoid it most of the time. But if you're okay with that, just be safe about it and be smart about it. That can be a good place to find stuff. Now let's talk about some places that you want to avoid. All right. You want to avoid what I would call retail resellers. Places like Second and Charles, if you're familiar with that store. Again, nothing personal against Second and Charles. It's a cool store. I like to go in there and look around. But we're talking about doing this on a budget. And if you go in there and you start buying old games from in there, you're going to spend a lot of money. So I just avoid buying anything from places like Second and Charles, or, other places that sell collectibles and used video games, because you're going to pay if you go there. Now, I already talked about how we should avoid the professional flea marketers that are always at the flea market, that, they have their electronics table because, they know what they have, and they're not going to sell stuff for less than what it's worth. But there's another type of, sometimes these are called thrift stores. They're different in that they're like separate booths. There's, you go throughout the store, there's these booths that are set up everywhere. And these are like people pay to rent a booth to set up their stuff in there to be sold at this thrift store. Those are not places I would go to either, because you're going to have the same problem that you would have with the professional flea marketers. If people are going through all that trouble to sell their electronics and their video games, they're going to know what it's worth before they put it in there, and you're not going to get a good deal on it. And I also would say, for the most part, you want to avoid pawn shops. And it's going to be for the same reason. When they're selling something at a pawn shop, usually they're going to know what it's worth. Now, there are some exceptions, though. And if you want to visit a few of your local pawn shops and see how they handle their video games, you might be able to find a deal. For example, I found a pawn shop one time who was selling all of their video games. It didn't matter what it was. They were selling them for $5. And so if you find something like that, for the most part, I'm not going to spend $5 on one game. But if I find let's just say, for example, Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 1, and it's in good shape, and it's got the booklet and all that kind of stuff, and they only want $5 for it, I'll give them $5, okay? So, if you find a pawn shop like that where they're kind of selling the games at a flat rate, then you might can find some good deals in there. But for the most part, you're not going to find good deals at pawn shops. So now let's talk about how to have a collection of video games, start collecting games, start building up your collection, and to keep it budget friendly, to not spend a lot of money. Because like any hobby, you could get into this and you could spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you could be, out there every day and just, buying stuff, because you're going to see cool stuff everywhere, right? And it could be very easy to just completely start going overboard with how much you're spending. But at the same time, if you are careful, you can have a nice collection of games that you spent very little on or even nothing on. You can have a full collection of games like I have that you have spent $0 on. Now, here's how you would do that. If you go out one weekend and you go to yard sales, thrift stores, whatever it is, let's just say throughout this whole week, 7 days, you spend $100 on video games, old video games. Now, if you spend $100, you should have a big pile of old games. Well, if you wanted to, now, this isn't going to be for everybody. Some people are just going to want to collect, and they're just going to want to keep everything they found, and that's fine. But if you wanted to make some of your money back, you could pick some of those things in the stack of games that you just bought that maybe you don't care about as much personally, but that are worth some money. And you could turn around and resell those to make some of your money back, or all of your money back. If you were to take 5 games that were worth $20 and you sold them online, then you've made all your money back, and everything you have left you basically got for free. So it's just something to think about. I know that's not going to be for everybody. Some people are completely against reselling, and I'm not a reseller. I've sold a few things here and there just for that reason, to make some of the money back that I've spent. But for the most part, I just want to collect, and it is hard for me to let go of stuff sometimes. But if that's for you, if you want to get to the point where you have a video game collection that costs you no money, you can do that. It is very possible to do that. One thing, though, that can help you not to spend so much money on these games is, before you go out to yard sales, or before you go out and, start buying whatever it is to set a budget. So, for example, before you go out to a yard sale, have a number in mind and say, okay, I'm not going to spend more than, let's just say, $30 today. And so you go out there and you've got $30, and that'll make you a little bit more picky about what you're spending that on. You won't come up to the first yard sale and you see a few things and it's like, well, here's some games and I've got some money and here you go. You'll be a little bit more picky about what you're looking for, and that can be helpful. Because, a lot of times I see things later in the day that I wanted, but I already spent that money on stuff that I didn't want as much. And so, it kind of sucks when that happens, because you don't want to be in a situation where you spend all your money on some games that, you didn't care too much about. And then an hour later, you come to a yard sale where they have a bunch of really cool stuff and you don't have any money left, or, you can buy it, but you're going to be over your budget. So I would try to set a budget and try to stick to that budget. It may even have to be like a weekly budget, and say, this is how much I'm going to spend this week in video games. I'm not going to go over this amount. If you do that, I think you'll be okay as far as, not spending too much money, but also at the same time building up a nice collection. And you do have to be okay with building up this collection over time. You're not going to have it in one weekend. You're not going to get it in 1 week, not unless you want to spend a ton of money. So just be patient, be content with getting a few things each week, and it'll grow. And over time, you'll have a very nice collection of games. Something else you may want to consider, and this is not something I do personally, but you may want to consider this if you're worried about, spending too much money on this. You might want to consider just focusing on one type of game or one system. So, for example, you might say, I'm going to collect PlayStation 2 games, and you're just going to have a nice collection of PlayStation 2 games. That'll keep you from spending your money everywhere else. It'll help you to focus in on one thing and help you stay budget friendly. Now, there are exceptions to some of these rules. There are some sports games that are sought after and are valuable. I'll give you an example. This game, ESPN 2K5, is a game that typically I'll just say I like to have it in my collection for a very specific reason. This was the last NFL game made by a different company other than EA Sports. After this year, EA Sports came into an exclusive deal with the NFL where they were the only ones that were allowed to make NFL games. And so this 2K5 game was the last NFL game ever made by a company other than EA Sports. So that's why when I saw this, I wanted to get it and put it in my collection. and I'm pretty sure I got it for like $1 anyway. So, but that's the kind of stuff by either. Well, I knew that from experience. I remember when it happened, but you can learn stuff like that through research. So just be aware that there are some exceptions. These are not hard and fast rules. There are some yearly sports games that, for whatever reason, are valuable and are sought after. You just have to do a little bit of research, but there's always exceptions to all of these rules. All right, well, this was a fun video for me to make. Not only did I get to show off some of my video game collection, but also I hope I gave you some information that helped you, and I hope you guys will think about getting into collecting these video games, because sadly, this physical media is becoming a thing of the past. Everything's going to digital, and pretty soon it's going to be to the point where you can't even get a game like this in a store. So something to think about. It's definitely one of the reasons I got into collecting video games. But I hope you got some good information here today. And if you did, be sure to like and comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.